Communication happens to be my area of gift, but I think all of us have gifts. All of us have something that God has blessed us with to make a unique contribution in the world. And I'm fortunate that not only I was able to discover my gift, but also that I've been able to make my life's work to be about that gift and about what I'm passionate about. I wish the same for each of you, that you find your calling, your gift, your uniqueness, and how to contribute it and find your personal fulfillment by loving others. I think that's the way it's meant to be. What do you think? Yeah. So through our discussions today, of course, we're getting an idea of the vision and ideal of the principle, but also that should help you be aware of what are the driving principles of Faith Fusion. What are the driving principles of the unification community in Worcester? And in each part, every community that's represented here, what is the vision and system of values that we live by and are trying to, manifest in our lives? And then participating in the community is the way to make that real. So I encourage you to take a look at all of the materials that are available and consider what you can do to take these ideals and make them real in your life. So we talked this morning about the blueprint, the ideal, the original imprint of God on the earth, on humanity, on the world, on the universe, and what's meant to be. Then we talked about the pathology, the problem, the breakdown, the human imprint, the contradiction that arose within us because of our separation from God. Now we begin the discussion of the third part. And again, this is just introductory. The principle goes in depth and detail into the development of human history and focuses on Judeo-Christian history because that's the heritage of this particular teaching. But the same principles can be found in all religious histories, in all the histories of all the world and all the nations. I did years of research and developed a detailed 3-hour presentation on the mission of America, the parallels in American history, and the spiritual course of America's history. And I think that similar things have been done. We've had representatives who developed the principle from an Islamic perspective, from a Hindu perspective, and I think the same could be done for any history. So our first topic of 2 this afternoon that address the development of history and God's work of restoration. The first is the messianic imprint. What is the power of one? Just for review, in our discussion this morning, we identified that higher purpose, that bigger picture that human beings cannot avoid longing to understand. Religion arose because human beings need to know, what's my connection to the bigger picture? Human beings are self-aware, conscious. And throughout human history, one thing that human beings have done is develop, as soon as humanity began to recognize, Homo sapiens, conscious, self-aware, recognize that there's something greater, more powerful, more immutable in the universe, we began to worship it. We began to fear it. So certainly religion began at very primitive levels, but it began by recognizing in the powers of nature. That's one of the sources of original human religion. Recognizing in the flow of nature and the powers of nature that there's something eternal, unchanging, and immutable that's beyond us, that we are not the center. A second source of traditional religion was when human beings began to rely on killing other animals for food, we were aware that we were causing suffering. And so a lot of religious ritual developed, particularly amongst the Aboriginal peoples, developed out of respect for the one whose life I took in order to eat. And rituals were developed in those ways. But these were the beginnings, the inklings of human understanding of something which now we understand in a much deeper way. The ultimate reality, the transcendent, unchanging, loving nature of God behind all of the natural world. So embodied in the 3 blessings in the scripture is the simple direction, the simple vision for why we are on this earth. First, be fruitful, like a tree grows to maturity. The blessing given to our first ancestors to be fruitful is the blessing to develop our individual character to maturity, to fulfill our potential. Then to multiply doesn't mean just make bodies. Any animal can reproduce bodies. To multiply means on the foundation of that personal spiritual maturity to create loving, God-centered families. And raise children in that environment to come to know the nature and love of God. And then to have dominion over the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, and everything that crawls on earth, indicates our stewardship, our loving responsibility over our environment, our creativity, our capacity for science and technology and development, to take responsibility for the world. That's the purpose of life. We learned that that is not something that comes about automatically. Nothing starts perfect. Everything needs to grow to maturity. Now, the natural world develops automatically, right? There's no possibility of fall or sin or confusion. No, you'll never see a flower, with an identity crisis. You'll never see an orange wishing it could be an apple, not sure about what its identity is, or its gender identity, or any of the kinds of confusions that have arisen because of our distance from our original selves and ideas. The natural world grows to maturity automatically, without any conscious effort. Human beings physically are the same, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, we have ownership and responsibility to grow. We need nurturing, we need parenting, we need guidance, we need love. We need to act upon what we know is right and develop ourselves. We cooperate with God. We are co-creators of ourselves. We take part in our own growth to maturity. So what we have when we reach maturity is something that no other creation has, that we know of, and that's creativity. Freedom and flexibility. And we can do amazing things simply because of our original godly nature. So as children of our Creator, God bequeathed that co-creatorship, that responsibility and blessing. However, that meant that our ancestors were responsible to reach personal spiritual maturity. And from that place, we would be able to master the power of love. Pornography would be non-existent. If a person is mature and knows what love is and understands intimacy, then a fantasized naked image of the opposite sex would have no meaning, no attraction, no power. It's our immaturity, it's our confusion, and it's our aloneness and distance that makes us susceptible to these struggles and difficulties. So in maturity, humanity would have the freedom and capacity to manage the power of love and sexuality. But before our ancestors reached maturity, humanity went outside the realm of the principle, creating a false and self-centered world where people suffer. A contradiction within ourselves, confusion in our relationships, and the problem within the individual multiplied to the world. However, a couple things we need to understand about the nature of the Creator. When we talked this morning, we talked about God being eternal, unchanging, and absolute. That means it's not so easy for God to say, I quit. I screwed up, let me try again. It doesn't work that way. God's very nature of perfection requires and compels our Creator to pursue His original will unchanging. God is eternal and unchanging. His will and goal and desire is unchanging. Also, if everything in God is what it is and does what it does because of heart, if love is the center, if heart is the center, then because of that nature of heart, it's also not within the nature of God to destroy His own children, to cut off those whom He loves. Even the human parents wouldn't act in such a way. Right? Healthy human parents. And God could be no less than that. So God's commitment is not to destroy the world, reject the world, give up on the world, but there is an unchanging determination to save the world. But as we'll see, salvation is a lot more than just forgiving us for our mistakes. It has to do with restoring the original purpose and plan, the unchanging original purpose and plan. So the problem is that when self became the center, then immature men and women created dysfunctional relationships, unstable societies, false, corrupt, oppressive nations, and a difficult and struggling world. That's been the history of humanity. Then God's purpose in history is not just to forgive sin, but to resolve it, to remove it, to restore the original purpose and value of humanity, his original purpose and ideal, to realize those three blessings. Now, that's not something you can do up in the sky. That's not something you can do mystically or magically. To rebuild the original quality and value and virtue of humanity. How is it done? Well, I want to ask this question. What is the power of one? What is the power of one person? It's so easy for us to think that, well, by myself I can't really do anything. But when you have even a small group like this, united together, then you can do great things. You can change lives. You can heal and impact communities. You can make a profound difference. But look historically how powerful one can be. Consider the situations, and these are just some of the major ones, but there are countless situations where the right person with the right character at the very right time appeared and became the catalyst of inspiring others, of hanging in there when others had lost faith, of maintaining the vision, and of creating an opportunity to transform history and change the lives of people in profound ways. These are some of the more obvious examples. Consider South Africa. I spent a night in Soweto during apartheid. I was snuck into Soweto, where black South Africans were required to live. They were not allowed to own land. They had to live in that forced existence. A minority of white South Africans whose ancestors had come there were controlling the country. That's just, and I don't say that looking down on them. America does not have a very proud history in terms of how a minority oppressed and dominated others. I couldn't dream when I was there of the fact that the transformation would take place with so little bloodshed, with so little damage, and that apartheid would end in my lifetime. It was difficult to conceive of that with what I saw. Right? But largely responsible. I mean, it was profound. I was actually amazed at Mandela's funeral. I was amazed at how much the world recognized the impact that this person, who had been jailed, who had been oppressed, who had been mistreated, he'd been given every opportunity to hate. And when he ultimately overcame and ultimately became the president, then his countrymen, his black countrymen, wanted to use the opportunity, like other newly liberated governments had done, to take retribution on those who'd oppressed them. To use government policy to give favor and advantage to the group that had been disadvantaged. What did Mandela say? We cannot do it that way. And he was concerned for all South Africans and made serious effort to not be like his oppressors, not be like those who'd gone before him. And as I said, I was moved by the funeral. I was beyond my expectation how much the world recognized and remembered how one person's heart and attitude could change the face of a nation. You look at India. Before Gandhi arose, Indians were controlled by their colonial masters, who had a policy, a stated policy of divide and rule. Keep the people separated. Keep Muslims and Hindus divided, and you can keep them down and you can rule them. And this was true around the world, in other colonies as well. Dependent on products from their colonial masters, less inferior products compared to what's sold in the home countries, all kinds of things that were going on. Just about my favorite movie in the world is the film of Gandhi. If you haven't seen it, you really should. Sorry to the young people, it's not full of computer graphics and exciting space shot scenes. But when I listened to the words of Gandhi, I felt the heart of Jesus. And the heart of my own religious founder, about when you suffer, when you take a beating for the sake of goodness, goodness will advance. And those who beat you will lose. You will inherit what they have. There's so much depth. And Gandhi understood that. He taught the Indian people to be self-reliant, and symbolically, to get their own salt from the salt water, to spin their own cloth, to not be reliant on their colonial masters. Yet he was absolutely committed to nonviolence. He learned that principle of nonviolence actually from a white man, Leo Tolstoy. And Gandhi and Tolstoy communicated. Tolstoy is one of my big spiritual heroes. And Gandhi, taking that principle that if you're a true Christian, then you have to be nonviolent, led the people of India to liberate themselves from their colonial masters. He changed the face of a nation. Tragically, he became the victim of the very hatred and resentment. He was assassinated because of religious hatred and intolerance. But he changed the face of a nation. And Gandhi's idea of nonviolence was inherited by another person who came at the right time, at the right place, with the right temperament and character. Now, I assure you that none of these men were perfect men. But I also can assure you that their arising at the time they did, in the place they did, and in the way they did, is more than just historical accident. There's a meaning and a process by which history is transformed, starting with one, as the world was, as human history was meant to start with one family, one root, one beginning. The sayings of Dr. King and his example to never stoop to the level of those who were filled with hatred and intolerance and injustice. His constant encouragement that there are many white men and women of goodwill, to see beyond color and to see, he said, in the final analysis, this is not a struggle between black and white. It's a struggle between justice and injustice, the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And his ability to keep the movement focused on what it was brought a transformation that couldn't have happened maybe 10 years before. Lincoln tried to accomplish something 100 years before. Slavery ended externally and officially, but white supremacy and oppression didn't end until now, actually, at some levels. King inspired a nation. The right person, the right character, at the right time.
When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
What is the power of one? Actually, there are examples on many levels. Community, society, national, of individuals who transformed their environment. But actually, providentially, God's process involves the power of one as well. If you look at every major faith tradition, all of them have a messianic ideal. The idea that someone will embody the standard, will set the example, will lay the foundation and liberate and inspire and lead others along the path to realize the original purpose of creation. Here, from Buddhism, the sutra of the great accomplishment of the Maitreya. Maitreya is the Buddha of love. The Buddha not just who transforms the inner self, but who transforms the world. These are the words of Buddha. Listen attentively with one heart. A man whose spirit shines brightly, a man whose mind is completely unified, a man whose virtue excels everyone. Such a man will truly appear in this world. When he preaches precious laws, all the people will totally be satisfied, as if they, thirsty, drink sweet drops of rain from heaven. And each and every one will attain the path of liberation from struggles. Kong-fu-tzu, whom we know as Confucius, Master Kung, also envisioned that a man of the true way would embody the virtues and values that all men needed to learn, and would set that example and lead others that way. And of course, in the Old Testament, the prophet Isaiah, among others, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. The government will be upon his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish and uphold it with justice, with righteousness, from this time forth and forevermore." The messianic ideal is also a universal, a religious universal. And in different religious traditions, it's identified in different ways. Christ to Christianity, Moshiach to Judaism, the Mahdi or hidden Imam in Islam, the Maitreya in Buddhism, the Avatar in Hinduism, which every particular age, every 2,000 years, a transformation in consciousness. Humanity enters a new age of consciousness, and an avatar is the catalyst. In Confucianism, the man of the true way, or man of truth. In the Zoroastrianism, the Saoshant. And many other forms in many other traditional and new religious teachings. But do you think there's going to be what? How many? 15 messiahs? No. One God, one world. The power of one. These are different perspectives on the same reality from the principle standpoint. And it's also in our popular culture about the person who struggles against evil, who sacrifices, who bears the burden of responsibility and goes to great extent, gives up their own personal life and goes through, if you've seen the series Lord of the Rings or read the books, in order to accomplish what will liberate humanity from evil. This is popular culture. This is our literature and our history, from The Matrix to Superman to Luke Skywalker.